Welcome to the edtech podcast. I'm your host, Hamid. Let's go. We're live with Gregg Scoresby, founder and CEO of CampusLogic. Hey, Greg.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to be on the podcast. Was this podcast number 5?
This will be number 6.
Number 6.
5 we actually recorded earlier this week.
Okay.
And yeah, so we haven't published it yet, but we're going to get towards a point where we actually do them live and live stream them, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so you are the founder of an incredibly successful local SaaS company, CampusLogic. You guys just raised $120 million, which closed last July, I think. So I want to start there and tell us about like what you're doing with CampusLogic, what CampusLogic is all about, and then I want to talk to you about so many different things. I know you're an active investor and lots of good stuff to talk about. So let's start with CampusLogic.
Sure. So just for people that don't know our company, we are a student financial success company. So we're a B2B SaaS company, and we sell our platform to colleges and universities so that they can make every student interaction mobile, simple, personalized. Everybody, if you've gone through the financial aid process to get a loan, a grant, a scholarship, you know how hard the process is. So we make that easy. We want to strengthen the relationship between schools and students, and we do that via software. So that's a little bit about who we are. Happy to jump into the capital raise if that's helpful.
No, that's perfect background. So like, what are you planning on doing with the raise, and give us a little bit of detail about that.
Well, one thing that's not always obvious to people when you raise and then you do a press release, sometimes there's a little bit of gap of time in that. So we did finish this right as COVID was, starting to smolder here in March. And then it was hard to get an announcement out, given a couple of things, including Black Lives Matter. It felt a little tone deaf to announce this in the middle of Black Lives Matter. And then we were getting ready to do an acquisition right after that. So one of the use of proceeds was to do acquisition. So we closed on a great company in July, right after we did this fundraise, called Raise Me.
Okay.
They're a micro scholarship company based in San Francisco. So that was a great acquisition for us. Great employees, great product, great purpose. So that was one of the use of proceeds. Oh,
that's awesome. And walk us through, because you started CampusLogic in what year?
2011, October 1st, 2011 was kind of the official launch date.
Okay.
Took us a few years to get the product right.
Okay. Those were tough few years, right? Because I remember you were trying to raise funds for quite a while, and you did a pitch at Invest Southwest, which was very memorable for me. I remember you were one of the finalist pitches, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But tell us about the sort of journey at the beginning, which was very difficult for you guys to get traction.
Yeah, for context, one of the reasons why I started the company, I have a lot of experience in financial aid operations. Nobody ever actually wants to get in the financial aid business. You just find yourself there and you can't get out.
Right.
And I saw a lot of opportunities to automate and improve the student experience. There were some other things. There was a regulatory change that happened in 2010. There was the no mobile and no cloud was being talked about in the financial aid community, and I believed, given a regulatory change coupled with just the need for cloud and mobile, it's hard to believe we're 15 years into mobile or less, right? So that seemed like there was going to be a big opportunity. So I started the company there, but really, Microsoft Azure wasn't available yet. AWS was still relatively new, and I made a lot of mistakes in the early days around building true multi-tenant, SaaS software. And some of that was who we hired and how we built the team. We relied on some of our past experience, which was more tech-enabled services than software, and so we made a bunch of mistakes around that. We had this great idea, great need in the market, but wrong architecture, wrong kind of early people around the table, wonderful people, just the wrong skill sets around the table. So we really struggled to get the product right.
What skill sets were you missing? Now, you're not a developer yourself, right?
Right.
So that was an important aspect of what you were building, because you're building a software company which heavily relies on software developers. And
Yeah, non-technical founders, and there's sometimes investors only invest in technical founders, and sometimes, and I think there's pros and cons to that. I think if you're talking about vertical software like we're in, you've got to have someone on the executive team and the leadership team. In this case, it was me, who had deep domain expertise. But yeah, the skills we got wrong were basically architecture, tooling, like just all of it. So
Did that cause you to like miss opportunities? Like you couldn't sell your product because the product itself was not good?
actually, so the story was we launched in 2011 around this idea, and then in 2012 we had a prototype, and I showed some customers from my previous company's experience and said, hey, if we brought this to market, would you buy it? And we had this great response. So the first product is called Student Forms, and the main thing that it did at the time was automating the receipt of tax documents. So a large percentage of financial aid recipients have to prove income. Not dissimilar. Financial aid offices don't call it this, but you or I would call it an underwriting function.
Okay.
They're determining eligibility.
Right.
And so sometimes there's this tax verification process. So we built a product that automated most of that, and people loved the product. It's a real pain point for schools and for students. But when we built a beta version the following year and took that out there, we got one customer on it, and there's a lot going on in the product where we're bringing in tax data, tax rules, and walking students through workflows, and there's a lot of and their parents at the same time. There's some specific e-signature requirements that we comply with. So there's a lot going on in the product. It's a regulated industry, and so I will say, like, to cut to the punchline here, two things. One, I think I successfully led a company to build the world's worst piece of software. That was one of the things we did in 2013. And the other thing that I proved, if you ever wondered, Hamid, I definitively proved students won't wait 2 minutes for a page load.
Okay.
That was one thing I proved.
That's awesome.
So it was just like it was wrong architecture and all that. So it was a complete and total restart in the summer of 2013, and that was rough. We were more than a couple $1 million into development. We'd signed contracts with customers. People wanted what we had, but it was, the code was totally unusable. We started over.
Wow.
We were out of cash. It was a really hard time then. And I think a lot of times, if you ask most founders that have had some success, they'll have some sort of near-death experience, near-company death experience.
That was it for you.
In their story, and that was it. Between 2013 and early 2014, we had to rebuild the product. But we probably wouldn't have been able to build what we built had it not been for kind of that rough experience we had.
Now, did I become an investor before or after that?
After.
Oh, okay.
After, in fact.
So I missed all of that.
Yeah, in fact,
okay,
when I pulled up, I'm I don't know if people would say that I'm an emotional guy or not, but I have been known to cry from time to time. So
okay.
There's a possibility that this is how a lot of founders, I think, feel. But when I pulled up to your office today here to do this podcast, I was remembering the first time I came here.
Yeah.
The first time I met you. And told you a little bit about the business, and you knew one of our other early investors, Clayton Mask.
Yeah.
And you pulled out your checkbook and you handed me a check. When someone gives you a check for something that you believe in, and you've gone like every single dollar you've got is already in, and someone gives you a little more fuel, you never forget those moments. So you came in right after we rebuilt the software, and we put a couple of new customers on it, and the software was awesome.
That's awesome.
I had my first customer. They were a week into going live on the product, and the director of financial aid called me and said, hey, this process used to take us 5 weeks because it's so complex, and we've got it down to 24 hours, and that's including all the exceptions. I mean, most of our students are going through real time, and that was like it became clear, hey, this thing's going to work. And so we signed a few more contracts, and you and several other investors came in at the time, and 14 was really when things started to really work, kind of the back half of 2014.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so you said you had sort of invested a lot of your own money into it. How did you, was it credit cards, like loans? What were you doing to fund it initially?
So I had the good fortune, the privilege to build a couple previous companies.
Okay.
I started a company called Core 3 that was in the financial aid business, and sold that in 2006 to a venture-backed company, and then left the industry for a few years. Started a company called Boomerang Capital Partners. Boomerang Capital Partners is probably one of the largest private lenders in Arizona now. It flourished after I sold it.
Okay.
You
had the Midas touch.
It was a really good business, but I wanted to get really focused on, and I'm an investor in that fund. I don't own any of the Boomerang Capital Partners, but it's run by a couple friends of mine who are wonderful leaders who have really, like, that business has grown 10x. But in the course of that, I was able to accumulate, a little bit of kind of seed stage myself, so I didn't have to raise money until
you ran out.
Until I ran out.
Yeah.
And so
that's a common founder story, right?
Yeah.
Like where they run out of resources essentially of their own because they're such huge believers, and then they go out there raising because they still believe in it, but the revenues are not yet paying for. So you had created something, a prototype. You knew customers were excited about it. You had the technology wrong because users were like getting frustrated because of 2-minute page loads or whatever, but you wanted to sort of invest in rebuilding it, and you did that. Now you're getting traction. People are starting to actually invest because you're getting traction. I didn't even know about the traction that you had, by the way, when I invested. But
one thing that we'll go talk about early stage investing and maybe my investment thesis, but as an angel investor, later on in the podcast, but part of that stems from my early days at CampusLogic. So I had customers signing contracts, and we tried to be really upfront with people to tell them, hey, this is in development, but I couldn't even get a demo to really work. So we took a video of the demo, and I had to splice out the latency in like this to do this, to be able to show people how this would work.
Video magic.
A little bit of video magic. And people were signing contracts off of this video. And we were really clear on, hey, this is where we are in this process. But they were signing contracts and paying up front for this. So I knew there was demand. So that idea of customer signal is huge, right?
Yeah.
In fact, when all else was lost, when we had no capital, kind of no code, the wrong team, what we did have is customers who wanted this product. And one of our early customers was Western Governors University, highly innovative institution. And Bob Collins has become a good friend, and he's the executive director of financial aid there. And I said to Bob, hey, the first version we built, he'd signed a contract, and I say, the first version we built didn't work, but if you'll hang in here, I'll show you code we release every 2 weeks. And he got visibility. Okay, this thing is real. The first version didn't work,
right.
But we gave him a lot of transparency, and they were one of our very early customers, and they're still one of probably our biggest customer today, and they use most of our products today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then what triggered this sort of, like, would you say the product development? Did you go out hiring the right people to solve this problem? What was it that like helped turn the ship around in terms of you knew you had the right market fit, but you didn't have a good product?
Yeah.
Was it building an in-house development team?
Yeah. We built an in-house development team, and I'd say it's a combination of architecture and modern tools.
Okay.
When things don't go right and you're the founder, and this isn't just a nice thing to say, it's the truth, but every problem's your problem,
right.
And so if you have the wrong team, like, that's your problem, right, to fix. And so I just didn't have enough experience then to find the right team and put the right team in place, ask the right questions to really vet, hey, this is what we're building. And then candidly, when you're talking about 10 years ago here, still relatively early in SaaS.
Yeah.
I mean, in all things considered. So, but anyway, we got the team right and got the products right, and it just started. The onboarding process started to go quickly. People were getting immediate value out of the products. And
how many people are you at this stage?
So we had probably 10 to 15 in 2014
Okay.
or so. And we ended 2014, which was really our first year of revenue. We ended about 300,000 in annual recurring revenue there. So we had a handful, 4 or 5 customers, which 7 years, less than 6.5 years later here, we've got 750 colleges, universities. Every college, university, almost you would know the name of, and so, but when you
So
get
incredible.
yeah.
What's revenues now?
So I know a lot of people don't share revenue. I'm fine sharing it. First of all, people don't have context
Right.
usually what this means, but we just passed 36 million in annual recurring revenue.
Congratulations, that's huge.
And we think we'll be mid 40s by the by the end of the year. So
That's
good.
incredible. I mean, from 300, like that's what is that? Almost 1,000. Is that 1,000-fold? No, that's a 100-fold increase from 2014.
Yeah, as an indicator, in 2018 and 2019, we were the fastest growing Arizona company on the Inc. 500. When you're starting with a lower denominator, it's easy to hit that benchmark. But we've continued to be really high growth. We're one of the probably 7 or 8 largest software companies in Metro Phoenix. And there's certainly some that are bigger, and remarkable companies that have done a great job. WebPT, Keep, formerly Infusionsoft, others that have done just a great job. But
it's single digit. I mean, like the success of CampusLogic is probably single digit number of companies in Arizona that have achieved that level of success, multi-$100-million valuations, and rapidly growing tens of millions of dollars in revenue, which is awesome.
Yeah, why do you think that is? I'd be interested in talking about that.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, like we could just jump into it now if you want. Yeah,
let's do it.
Feel free. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I've never. I think San Francisco is a wonderful city to visit, and I think there's an incredible amount of talent there for sure. I mean, it's the mecca of dev talent. I think sometimes when people think they want to be the next Silicon Valley, I think that candidly, I think we can do better than that. And I think there are I think the cities to compare to are more on the up and comer side. I get a little bent when Phoenix doesn't get included in the same conversation as Austin or Denver, Boulder, Provo, Salt Lake corridor area. And we have more people. One of the stats I think that is an indicator, I haven't looked at this in the last year or two, but I think in 2019, I think Arizona was one of the very few states that was a net exporter of computer science degrees. And this is that's a bad metric.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because ASU and U of A grads are going out of state.
Well, and we've got net migration going up. So we've got migration going up, but but we're exporting more talent than we are making jobs available for. So I think sometimes we don't always know how to connect talent into the community. I think that's a real problem. It continues to be a problem. It's hard we got to shine a spotlight on what's going on here. So part of that is just internal marketing. I think AZ Tech Beat's going to help with that.
It's going to solve all the problems.
Well, I'll tell you, like I love the Phoenix Business Journal, but as an example, like today, it was on my desk today, there's 3 or 4 pages dedicated to $1 million homes.
Right.
And I think there was not a single software company mentioned in this issue. And that's not right. Like there's a lot going on here that doesn't get covered in local press. So I do think AZ Tech Beat can be really helpful with that. So I think part of it's just visibility is a challenge. I think also that we haven't always people want to say, oh, there's not enough venture capital here. I think there is a gap in early stage capital. I know that you and Lawton have been focused on that. And I think that is a problem. But we also need founders. We need more experienced founders. That doesn't mean a first-time founder can't be a first-time founder can be an experienced founder, but we need to learn how to make our businesses more investable.
Right.
So we got to tell the right story and build muscle around that. I've had great mentoring in that area. So I think there's a combination of things, but it's not that there's an absence of talent. There's a ton of talent here, But I think we've got to get the right visibility to what is happening here. We've got to get the right capital into those early stage capital into those companies, and we've got to make our help our founders make their companies more investable. And those are a few things I see that maybe limit us to be the next Salt Lake, Denver, Austin.
One of the things that you just mentioned is building muscle around telling the story for the founders. And I remember very specifically the Invest Southwest pitch that the
2015.
Yeah, I think the way it worked is like they start with like 16 companies or something like that, and they sort of narrow it down to 8, then 4, then 2, and you were in the final 2, and you were going up against some company that had some medical devices. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember that company's pitch being all about how they saved lives. And you came on stage and you just totally destroyed the sort of saving lives thing. Do you remember what you said there?
Well, yes. I had a line in there in my PowerPoint that said, "And we save lives." And then I said, just kidding, we don't do that. But yeah, the Venture Madness, let me tell you, this is a bright spot, actually. Venture Madness was completely pivotal for us. So we raised a little bit of seed stage in the back part of 14. You were one of the early investors. But when we won Venture Madness, it took me probably, and we had a convertible note going where we were just raising and funding as we were going between 2014 and Venture Madness was March of 2015. Between March and August, so I raised maybe $1 million, and we raised like 3 times that between March and August, like the next 5 months after Venture Madness. So it was really pivotal. The Arizona Commerce Authority is a real bright spot in Arizona. I think a lot of people don't realize there's this. It's sort of they wouldn't use these words, but it feels like a public-private partnership where they are helping drive the right focus, the right support, the right dollars. Sandra Watson is a wonderful CEO there.
I agree.
And I think, and they are the premier sponsor of Venture Madness with Invest Southwest. So I just think that's a wonderful entity to give and a focus to give early stage companies a chance to pitch against each other. And I met a bunch of people there in that I still keep in contact with all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Venture Madness, I go every year. In fact, I'm going to sponsor the SaaS track. They've changed the format a little bit, but I'm going to sponsor the SaaS track this year in Venture Madness which feels like coming full circle. We won in 2015, and to be able to sponsor it in 2021 feels really good.
That's great. That's great. But and the presentation and telling the story is like such an important aspect of being a founder, to be able to sell your company essentially. And raising money has a lot to do with that, because you kind of think that other people are immediately going to get what your business is about, and they don't, right? Like the one-liner for CampusLogic may have been that like we help student loans for students or whatever, but like that's not exciting, or like it's just by itself you don't get like why you should be excited about this business, right?
Yeah, so practice pitching is one thing that Venture Madness came about, but there's the coaching process, and it's not just limited to the Venture Madness event. This is happening through a number of programs. Startup AZ helps people. Helps early stage founders through some cohorts they've got there. There's a Venture Ready program that is doing this as well here. But I don't know if I said this exactly at the beginning of the podcast here, but if I ever say we do X for Y so that they can Z, I specifically got that from Dave Bittner. Do you know Dave?
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I specifically got that from Dave Bittner in the Venture Madness experience. And that sounds so obvious. We do X, like this is our product.
Very simple formula.
Yeah, for Y, our customers, so that they can Z, like the benefit. And that sounds really obvious, but sometimes when we are building our companies and we know the regulatory, in my environment, in my world, the regulatory complexity I solve, that translates into a pitch that's way too complex.
Right.
And so simplifying your message and helping connect the value that we add to our customers and why this should matter to investors is a skill that all of us as entrepreneurs need to learn and refine.
That's awesome. You're super competitive, right? Would you agree with that?
You know, nope. I don't really feel like competitive with other people. People wouldn't tell you. Like I would tell you when we play games with my family or something, I don't care that much if I lose. Like I don't care that much. There are some things I would say I'm pretty driven.
Okay.
Like that most people would tell you like, and I would say potentially obsessive. Like people will tell you that like I don't sleep that well. I don't think that that's not a brag. That's I'm working on it. It's not healthy, but when you're obsessive and you want to win, I don't need other people to lose to have that happen.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, but
yes.
the competitive nature comes across for sure because I remember sending you an email a few weeks ago, a couple months ago maybe, about how like, hey, I want to invest in local companies, and I'm thinking about announcing something focused on the sort of early stage startups, and I get this long email about your strategy to be this sort of #1 angel in Arizona.
Yeah.
and I loved the email, and I was like, man, this guy is awesome, first of all. But I think reading between the lines, he's like showing me down a little bit, like like saying, I'm gonna beat you. But I loved it. I mean, it was fantastic. So
well, here's a little bit of context.
Okay.
Here's a little bit of context to connect a few pieces of the story together. In 2013, when our product didn't work and I had to lay off half the company and we were out of cash, my wife said to me, and we could do another podcast another time about the impact that company building can have on marriages and families. Fortunately for mine, I got to see this remarkable side of my marriage, but that made our marriage stronger. But it was hard, really hard. But my wife says to me, and she's a great advisor, and she says, hey, you need to find someone who's been in the struggle before that you've gone through, and you need to go get some advice. So I called Clayton Mask. I'd never talked to Clayton. I had heard Clayton talk about some early stage challenges he had while building Infusionsoft, now Keep. And I got some advice from him. And Clayton was actually my very first check that came into the company right after we launched the new product in 2014. But he would check in on me every month or so. So when I say that I want to be, long term, my goal is to be the most active software investor. It's not about placing the most money. It's not about beating other people, but I'm all in on helping Phoenix in particular get talked about in the same breath as Salt Lake, Denver, and Austin.
Right.
And in order to do that, you got to spend time with founders. You got to give your time and you got to give your money. And that, so for me, I'm really competitive with myself against that goal of helping that happen here. And I know you are. I know you're.
I love that, though.
I know you're a bird of the same feather there.
Well, you asked what's missing in Arizona. Why aren't we talked about in the same way? Why haven't we had the huge successes? Why is CampusLogic type successes a single-digit thing in Arizona? And I think it's because we've been missing this exact component, right? Where, founders are super passionate about this particular subject area, and they want to help, and they want to they've gone through the struggles, and they know the struggles, and they want to help other founders get there. And a lot of that has been missing, the missing component. I think we've started to get some of it in the past 10 years, but I think your type of attitude is what's going to help get us there.
Yeah, I think you look at some of the companies that have had some recent successes. A lot of these founders have WebPT on their resume. They've got like Jacob Finley from Fullbay was at WebPT, and Fullbay's been good success story, vertical SaaS company, growing really well. Wish I would have had a chance to invest. I didn't. Or maybe I did, but I didn't have any money. Maybe that was
maybe that was the problem.
Jacob will probably correct me on that. But if you take a look at a company you and I just invested in NurtureBoss, Jacob Carter spent a little bit of time at Infusionsoft. He was also at Integrate, Jeremy Bloom's company. And, you start to see that these people have had this great experience. And when they have this great early stage, like growth company experience, coupled with some founder mentoring and capital, that's when you're going to see this entrepreneurial explosion happen here.
Right.
And you're starting to see that happen.
Yeah, totally. So while we're on the subject, and I want to go back and touch on a few things that you mentioned, but while we're on the subject of companies you've invested in, like NurtureBoss, what else? What other company have you invested in that you're excited about?
Several. So I think Gabe Cooper at Virtuous. I met Gabe a few years ago, and Gabe, in the first conversation, the very first time we met for breakfast, and in the first 5 minutes, he talks about customer acquisition cost. He talks about lifetime value. He talks about like sales cycle duration. He's talking about the value proposition that they provide to nonprofits. Like when a founder understands the math of her business or his business, and and Gabe was that guy. So I invested in Virtuous a couple years ago. I'm on the board of Virtuous. I also understand the nonprofit profile a little bit from my CampusLogic experience, since all of our customers are nonprofits, universities, and anyway, that's one. Chris Ronzio at Trainual is remarkable. Same thing. I saw Chris, and I could see the month-over-month growth in his business, and he could talk about the month-over-month growth. He was really conversant in customer acquisition cost by channel, and he and Clayt had engaged with him. Clayt understood that business because Clayt's business at Infusionsoft was selling more to SMB, and I think that was closer to Chris as well. But I think there was good pattern recognition at Trainual, so that was a business. Last year, I invested in Rebecca Clyde's company, BotCo, and nice. Rebecca really pivoted from being more generic bot to focusing on healthcare, which I think I'm not an expert in AI, but I think the ontology that they've focused on within their AI and around healthcare, they're delivering real efficacy for their healthcare customers. So, but Rebecca's like a insanely driven person. She's a wonderful marketer, and she's got great co-founders too. So that's another one that I'm excited about. Mentioned NurtureBoss, a few others. You and I are both investors. Unfortunately, I think I got in a later valuation in Prenda. Really excited about Kelly.
Yeah.
Kelly's a category creating guy, so I love that. But what else did I forget? A few others.
That's a great list. First of all, so thank you for sharing that actually, and I think those are fantastic founders. I think I know every single one of them, and I couldn't agree more. Every single one of them are great founders. So I want to go back to the struggle that you just mentioned with respect to CampusLogic, and when you were going through the hardship where you're out of money, you're laying people off. Talk about the layoff first of all. How did that impact you, and then how did that impact you on a personal level? Because you also mentioned you and your wife had to have some hard conversations as well.
Yeah. What I remember, and I'll skip over like a couple of details to keep this under 4 hours. But the two things. One, let me start with the kind of conversation with my wife. So when it was clear we were out of cash and wrong team, wrong architecture here, I thought about, hey, would it be better to shut this down, and that just didn't feel good. It didn't. I was like, I can't do it.
How close were you to doing that?
Well, this story is really funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. So we bounced payroll twice.
Oh, wow.
And when I say bounced payroll, the first time, like we had receivables and we were waiting for people to pay us. It wasn't like we intentionally did this, but we couldn't collect. Sometimes universities they don't pay in 30 days. Sometimes it's 45, 60 days. So we had receivables, but we hadn't received. But the payroll company went to pull the cash out of our account, and it wasn't there, and they funded payroll anyway. They basically gave us like a $50,000 loan.
Wow.
And they called us up and said, hey, like, what's the deal? You owe us $50,000. and like a week later, the receivable came in, paid them, and it was good. On the second time they happened, and they were like, hey, we're all good. You've been a customer for a long time. We're like, it's good. And the second time it happened, they're like, this isn't funny. Like, you're, like you can't be a customer anymore. And they fired us.
Oh, wow.
But, they got paid and all that. But so when you say how close, like, was there a negative balance in our account on the regular? Yeah, there was. Like, that was pretty regular. Chris Horn, who's VP of Finance at Virtuous now, he was my VP of Finance early on, and Chris would, like, he'll tell you, like, we would laugh every 2 weeks. I had an early stage employee. This was in 2014 after we kind of rebuilt the team, and he's like, his name, I won't say his last name, but his name was John. And John said, he's not with the company anymore, but he said, hey, Greg, we're not going to run out of cash, are we? And I'm like, dude, we run out of cash every 2 weeks. Like, every time we pay your paycheck, we run out of cash. And that was surprising to him. Other people, and it wasn't like we didn't talk about it. But
you were using that as a recruiting tool.
Yeah, I was like, hey, do you want to come here and run the risk of not getting paid? Like, you should come. And everybody always got paid. Every vendor got paid. Everyone got paid. But but it was really hard. So when you ask how often, it was pretty regular. On the marriage side, one of the things I really, my wife's name is Jill. She's a social worker, not a business person. She's a wonderful mom. She's a wonderful foster mom. We've done foster has been a big part of our life the last 8 years.
That's awesome.
And she, she's great at that. I show up once in a while, but she's good at that. And but when we were really in the financial struggle, I said, Jill, I just don't see how we're going to make it through. And she's like, well, we can sell the house, like I can go, she was home. She's been home with our kids plus foster kids. She said, I can go, back to counseling, back to work. And, like we got lots of things we can do. And she's not really oriented around consumption, and neither am I, and so we don't spend a lot. But that attitude for me was so motivating. She could have said, "Hey, you sold a couple companies before. We made a little bit of money,
and you lost it all.
And you lost it all." And she never said that. I never felt that. I never heard that. It was never that vibe. And I do think, she's a remarkable partner, and it's not because she's a business person. In fact, maybe because she's not a business person, is what made her a really good partner. But yeah, that's I got to see a different side of my marriage, candidly, that I would have never gotten to see, and it's made our marriage even better. I think it has. Hopefully, she does too.
That's amazing. What's funny is that that little conversation right there could have been the difference between a multi-$100-million company today existing or not existing, right? I mean,
well, one of the things,
thank you, Jill.
Yeah,
right?
one of the things that Jill saw also, like within the subsequent, it wasn't like that was one conversation either. When you run out of cash every 2 weeks, we're having this conversation every couple of weeks
right.
And it can be exhausting. It's exhausting for us as entrepreneurs. It can be exhausting for our, husbands, wives, partners around us too. But at other times, I would say, man, this is really hard. And she would say, well, it's not really in your nature to quit. So why don't you just you're going to do this. So just keep going. It's fine. It's going to work out.
Take a break and then go.
Yeah, and it's good. But she was a lot of times where, she would really push. But yeah, my marriage broadly, her specifically, but my, just my marriage to her, has been the single thing that's been stable sometimes, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs would tell you that, that their close friend or their, significant other has been, or, their siblings or their parents, like that, those closest relationships are what have gotten them through really hard times.
That's awesome. Good stuff.
You've probably got some stories. Laden probably has some stories, both of you.
Laden has much better stories than I do. I only give her grief, essentially. It's one directional, really. She's amazing and does really cool stuff. And I'm constantly in my own head doing stuff like, this, for example.
I need to message her and hear about the foundation stuff she's working on. I saw that on her profile. I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were fortunate enough to sell the two companies, so we set aside some money for nonprofit activities, and she's heavily focused on that stuff right now. So
I'm excited to learn from her on that.
I'll have to have her as a guest at some
Yeah.
point, but maybe I'll have you interview her actually, so that way she can speak freely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about building a team, right? So early on, you were missing the sort of software development component, but one of the things I noticed you being hyper focused on at CampusLogic is just like hiring the best people you can to put into some of the sort of management positions in the company. And I think that, I want you to comment on that, because I suspect that has had a big impact on what has transpired at CampusLogic. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, any successes that any entrepreneur has, is probably about the team. But I think in general, I'd say my overarching view on founding a company, building a company. There's three jobs that a CEO has. You're setting the strategy. Hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to build. This is what we're doing. So that kind of vision. 2, you've got to hire the team to shape the vision and execute the vision. And 3, you got to make sure you have cash to pay the team. Right. And so those 3 things, strategy, people, and capital, are really what entrepreneurs need to be good at. So on the team part specifically, in 2014, I thought, what's the thing that I'm missing the most here? We've got customer contracts and I got no product here. How do I go find someone who has done multi-tenant SaaS in higher education at scale? Like, they've got industry context and they've got they can architect or they can build a team to architect.
Did you find someone who had all of those things?
So I met this. I'm a known LinkedIn stalker.
Okay.
I really do believe that early stage founders, if you're not spending 10 to 20 hours a week recruiting, it's a secret sauce to building a successful company. Is you're the chief recruiting officer. And it doesn't mean you don't have other recruiting help, but if you want to attract top talent, if I have a recruiter reach out to someone, there's some low probability that people are going to respond. If the CEO reaches out and a founder and says, I found your LinkedIn profile, I want to talk to you about this opportunity I have because I have this need, your skill looks perfect for what I need, and this is the purpose that I'm trying to fulfill in my company. If this purpose resonates with you, I want to talk to you about this. And people want to connect their personal purpose to the purpose of an organization. Like, every person in the world wants to do purposeful work. So if you can help connect the purpose of your organization, the mission and the purpose with what other people want to do, you can attract top talent. Even people will trade off a lot of things. So Chris Chumley was, I found this woman on LinkedIn. Jennifer was her first name. I'm blanking on her last name. I've never met her. I had one conversation with her. She took my call. She responded on LinkedIn. She lived in Philadelphia, and she said, hey, no chance I'm moving to Phoenix.
Okay.
And I'm not interested in what you're doing. I think it's interesting, but it's not for me. But you should talk to Chris Chumley, who I used to work for. And Chris was, I was looking for more like a VP level, and Chris lived in Denver, and Chris was, he had built the first multi-tenant SaaS student information system, a company called Top School that's since been acquired. And but he had industry context. Prior to that, he implemented Oracle and PeopleSoft.
How did you get him?
Well,
I think a lot of founders would be like, well, I know the right person, but they cost too much, or they're not ready to come into a startup that's struggling, or So you're at this point struggling. You don't have a product, and you're like, what's your pitch to Chris?
I said, you can make less money, and you can.
You started out selling him right off the bat.
First of all, I think a lot of mistakes we make sometimes as founders is we view recruiting as transactional instead of relational. And we should think about this as, I'm not just trying to get this, I got to fill this role. And so I started talking to Chris in like February of 2014, before our new version launched, and because we had kind of pieced together with some outside contractors to do that, and I said, Chris, why don't you come, just fly down here, take a day off, fly down here. And he's like, well, I can't move. And I was like, that's fine, just fly down here, and
That's fine.
and come down here, and I said, and he said, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. I just like it'd be hard for me right now to make a move. And we checked in every few weeks, and I was like, and he was going to be way more than I had money to afford, but and so we kind of stumbled along with that. But I kept talking to Chris every month or so, and then something in his employment started to change in August, and I hired him, and I got him to come in September. And what really resonated with Chris is I laid out a product portfolio, and I said, we're going to build a series of products to transform the student experience around this thing. And when we talked about the role, I said, what are you good at, and what do you want to do? And he said, I've always believed that customer success, like the onboarding piece, should be closely, in early stage companies, should be connected with product and engineering. Like there should be a really tight feedback loop about what customers are experiencing. If customers are unhappy, it's with some feature in the product, some missing feature in the product, or the way the product was onboarded. So you want that feedback loop really close. I know most companies don't organize that way, but when Chris said that, I said, so I'm going to call that my chief operating officer, and I want you to do that role. But he'd been a product guy, and he's a really hands-on product guy. And I said, and here's the purpose that we're driving to. We're trying to help schools change lives, and this is what I want you to play. And he agreed to take the job, and he said, well, my kids are just started school here in Denver. I can't move them this year. And also I think he was also thinking this company's might not make it.
Right.
And I said, well, why don't you move here like during the week, and I'll give you literally it was like $1,000 a month for relo and travel. It was like not even enough to cover his cost. But he borrowed his parents' RV. He drove it down here. He rented a slip at an RV place, and he lived in an RV Monday through Friday. Wow. For like the first 9 months. And Chris laughs, and we laugh about that, and we tell that story a lot. And I spent a lot of time with Chris, like a lot of evenings. Chris and I would, because his family wasn't around, and my family didn't expect me to be around because they knew and so I spent a lot of time with Chris talking about where we were going, and we've become really good friends. We we work together today. He's what I call a non-founding co-founder, but that was like a 7 or 8 month courtship, to recruit him, and it was connecting the purpose of the organization to his purpose, and his skill set and his desire, and he helped shape the role on what he wanted, and then I gave him total, autonomy. I mean, people that work on my team would tell you that I'm driven, and they have more autonomy working with me than they've ever had anywhere. I mean, you can't hire top talent and then tell them, hey, let me get in the business of your, and it's not that I don't have opinions. Right. But I've never once put something on Chris's roadmap. That's not how it works, where I don't hijack his roadmap.
That's awesome.
I do give input, but there's a joke on the dev team at CampusLogic. There's the backlog, and then there's the deep backlog. And most of my suggestions go in the deep backlog.
That's the stuff developers never see.
Yeah. But anyway, that's I do feel, and I can tell you other recruiting stories like that. But if there are founders listening to the podcast, I would tell you almost for sure, as founders, we don't do enough recruiting, because it is one of the top 3 things we need to do. Right. Strategy, people, capital, and it is, and nobody wants to talk to a recruiter. They want to talk to the founder. Yeah. They want to hear what's the vision. Where are we going? How are we going to be successful? So I just think we don't do enough of that typically as founders to attract top talent. And that's especially true in a metro like this, where you got to get people like Chris Chumley to move from Denver to Phoenix. Yeah. And that's happening in other companies here today, but it should be happening even more.
How many employees does CampusLogic have right now?
We have about 170, and 100 and probably 20 or so are here. The balance are salespeople out in the field and people we've picked up through a couple of acquisitions.
And then how many people report to you? Like how many levels do you guys have?
We have, so on my executive team, there's Darren Steele. He's the chief marketing officer. He was the CMO for a number of years at Axon, which he was a big ad for us last year. Darren's a great CMO.
That's the Taser.
Yeah, Taser,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, there's more technology in that company than people realize. Dash cam and the storage.
They've gone full force
Yeah.
tech because they're now doing all of the what do you call
cams.
it? The body cam, and then they have the back end.
Yeah, you're streaming.
So they're giving
and
the
storing.
body cams for free, if I remember correctly. Like I heard a story where they're giving the body cams for free and charging for the service of like storing and being able to search all of that video, which is kind of incredible.
You know, there's this really disproportionate number. If you look at television content, there's a huge number of police shows on TV. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
There's a huge number of TV shows. And whenever they show body cam, the Axon logo, if you've
Is
ever
there?
noticed that, is there.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's really, like the little yellow logo that's up there. It's like in every police show, and they show body cam or dash cam footage, it's there. But anyway, Darren came from there, and then Chris Chumley, and then Colleen Shannon is our CFO. She's a long-time tech CFO here in the Valley. She was at Lumention, a security company here that was highly successful. And then Allison Duquette is Chief Revenue Officer, and she leads sales, marketing, and now customer success. We brought those whole things those together just in January. So we moved customer success out from underneath Chris and given the whole customer journey to Allison. But those are my direct reports, and then VP of People reports to me as well. And then
So 6 or 7 people report to you, and then everybody else sort of
Yeah.
reports to someone who reports to them.
yeah, and five direct reports is about right for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are good with 8 or 9. I'm actually better with like 5.
Fewer.
Yeah.
That's cool. How do you spend your time with them? Is it like a lot of meetings, or do you do one-on-ones?
So this isn't a hack for everybody, but for me, I want big blocks of unstructured time and where there aren't transitions between meetings. For me, because when I have recurring meetings spread throughout the week, it just it feels like I never get anything done for me, my stuff. So I have 45-minute one-on-ones with my team, 8 to 8:45 on Monday, 8 to 8:45, 8:45 to 9:30, 9:30 to 10:15, 10:15 to 11, like that every Monday, and then we have a company meeting every other week on Monday or over lunch. And then we have all of our vice presidents meet on Monday where we're looking at OKRs and company performance every other week. And then executive team meeting for 2 hours every Monday. And what that allows me to do is I'm doing one-on-ones with everybody, and you start to get a sense of, hey, if there's something that marketing's talking about and sales is talking about something too in my one-on-one, it allows me to bring it together in our executive team meeting to say, hey, this seems to be something that we need to fix right now.
It's come up a few times.
It's come up a few times. And that's been a really good cadence for me. And I try really hard not to let recurring meetings come on any other day than Monday.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of other meetings through the week, but that's what I do. And then I block out, I try to block out every Tuesday morning and Thursday morning where no meetings, and sometimes more than that. Sometimes I'll block out more than that, but always at least Tuesday, Thursday mornings. So I've got 4 or 5 hours, and then a lot of calls on the afternoon on those. And I found that if you don't block that out, it's hard to not let your week get away from you. Do you do something like that?
For sure. Yeah, I had similar type of strategies where most of our recurring meetings was on Mondays, but then I had, eventually I was much more involved in product development, and I had those meetings on other days of the week. Let me ask you, you mentioned OKRs. How long have you been doing that, and what do you think about them?
I would say compared to most companies, we have a really lightweight kind of process. So we have a strategic planning process that we go through where our executive team sets, and I kind of want things on a quarterly cadence. So we'll set a quarterly objectives. So we have five strategic themes that we need to hit our next mission, which is we're going to get to 100 million by 2025.
Okay.
And that's the mission. And there need to be 5 strategic themes or thrust to get there. So as an example, one of them is invest in people and culture. Another one is create the category. Another one, like the category of student financial success. And so those are a couple of examples, but we'll create objectives against those kind of, this is what we want to do to move this strategic theme forward on once a quarter. And then we work with the VPs, which there's probably 13 or so of, about 11 or 12, I guess, and where we work with them once a quarter to talk about those objectives, set KRs, and then they go work with their teams. But we don't do a bunch of, we're not trying to ladder KRs all the way down through the organization.
Okay.
I've seen organizations do that.
All the way down to the...
And it just gets really weighty. I mean, the individual leaders are doing that on their teams, but we don't track it at the organization level. I've seen companies spend, hours and hours on the reporting of it all.
Yeah.
And for us, I'm trying to focus more on the outcome and give people the autonomy. But we've been doing that for a few years. We started off with a process early on. There's a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and it's similar conceptually, but we've gone to pretty lightweight OKR process. So we don't. It's really more the value in OKRs to me are about keeping people aligned about, hey, this is where we're headed.
Right.
So
quarterly objectives, annual objectives, et cetera.
Yeah. And I've found that to just be, and keep it pretty lightweight, keep it simple, so people can remember it and digest it. If people can't remember what you're working on, then it defeats the whole purpose of trying to create alignment.
Very cool. So I want to change subjects to family, and I know you have kids. I want to talk about that a little bit, but before we change subjects, anything else you want to talk about with CampusLogic or team building or advice to founders or anything in that arena?
No, I mean, I'm kind of a broken record on all of this. I will say one thing about company building. Like there are people that have known me for a long time have heard me say this before, but I think company building is just an incredibly important endeavor in this. It's a noble endeavor, and we spend more time at work than we spend in anything else aspect of our lives, any other waking activity.
Yeah.
And if you are a founder and you create a great place to work, and all of your employees have stock options, and you can have people experience the emotional benefits of ownership coupled with like the financial benefits of ownership, that's how you change individuals' lives, families' lives, communities. So I just think company building is an incredibly important thing to do. It's not easy to do. There's easier ways to probably make a living.
Yeah.
But I think it's really rewarding for individuals and families and communities. And so I hope that if people are thinking about building a company, I'm all for it. I encourage people to.
That's awesome.
To do that. We need more company builders.
Very cool. I forgot to ask you, by the way, how COVID has impacted CampusLogic. Did you guys go all remote, or?
Yeah, we've been remote. I would say that I think there's some people that love being remote, and I think there's some people that don't. We went all remote, and as a software company, it wasn't hard. It's not like it's not hard to tell people. Like we would work remote in the evenings, right?
Right.
Or or on the weekends if we log into something. So it wasn't hard to go remote. I will tell you what's hard is I've had in my company meetings, for example, I mentioned where we're doing that every 2 weeks. I've had some employees say, "Hey, you seem a little less engaged than you used to," and I'll say, "Yeah, I'm less engaged. I'm talking to the whole company in a screen instead of in front of people."
Right.
Like
you're less animated.
Yeah, and I don't get to come into the office and see people and talk about how their weekends were. Like it's harder to engage.
Yeah.
It's harder for individuals to engage, including CEOs. And so now I think we will be more flexible than we were pre-COVID, but we're not an all remote company. We never will be an all remote company.
You're looking forward to going back to the
Oh
office?
yeah, most of our employees are, but we'll be more flexible. I mean,
Yeah.
we were pretty flexible before. As an example, we don't really track, PTO very much.
Right.
We don't we're not really, trying to make sure people are in their desk by 8 a.m. or anything like
Right,
that.
right.
And so it's a pretty loose culture in that regard. But I think one of the things I worry about with being remote that I think we should talk about more. I think I don't think this is going to be good for remote is good for mentoring. I don't think it's good for developing younger people. I think people that historically have been under mentored, women, people of color. I don't think this is going to result in more mentoring for these underrepresented groups.
That's a really good point.
And so I just don't believe that this is going to have. I do think that we want to be flexible and recognize people have lives. People want to do good work. Nobody wants to do nothing in their job. Everybody wants to do fulfilling work. So let's give people flexibility around that. But there are some things that are better in person. And so even our remote salespeople, I want to see our remote salespeople once a quarter for sales meetings. I like spending time with them.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be more flexible in the past, but I think in person is an important part of culture building, important part of mentoring.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to family. How many kids do you have, by the way?
5 kids of our own.
Okay, and number of sons versus daughters and.
Oldest daughter, then 3 boys, and then youngest daughter. So the oldest daughter is 26. Youngest daughter turned 16 this month, and then 3 boys in the middle.
Okay, very cool. Because I have a lot of parenting questions to ask you. If you've gone through all the teenage years, it sounds like, and you still have a teenager.
I have no answers.
No answers.
I will tell you. You can ask all the questions you want. I have no answers.
Well, you mentioned that you're starting to work with your son. So can you tell me a little bit about that? What that's like?
Yeah, 2 things. One, I'm in a full-time operating role at CampusLogic. I'm liking it. I don't think I'll be doing this 5 to 10 years from now at CampusLogic, but and I've been pretty vocal about that. But I also have other interests that are and investing pursuits that I really can't do without help. And so to have my son help me do that with Phoenix Ventures
that's awesome.
is great. And so his name's Jack. He just bought a house in Gilbert, Arizona, and he will be a lot more visible in the local tech community coming up when he gets here in officially in May.
Where is he now?
He's in Utah. He went to Utah Valley University.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're not you haven't started full time or have you started working with him on a regular basis or
Yeah, we started working. He was at Qualtrics in a kind of sales role up there in Utah and learned a little bit there. And then he's a pretty ambitious guy. I have a son. I also have a son named Bennett who is a CampusLogic intern. He's also at Utah Valley, but he's a software developer.
He reports to someone else other than you, though.
Yeah.
So
I would have fired him a long time ago. I'm sure I'm sure Bennett's going to listen to this. Bennett, I'm just kidding. I talked to him on the way over here. He's great. In fact, one of the things I literally was driving over here, and he said, "Hey, I've got this business idea." Like he's of probably all my kids, if there's someone who's going to start a company, he's really entrepreneurial. I mean,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so he's great.
Yeah. What is it like as a father to work with your son? I mean, like I have a 15-year-old son, and I love him to death, but we clash heads right now nonstop. And like, I wish I could talk to him. I wish I could give him instructions. None of that is possible. Did you go through a phase where that was the case with these guys, or?
Yeah, I think you just defined like all teenagers. I mean, to some extent, I was like that.
So you think there's hope?
One of the things that I have tried to do, I don't know if I've done it well, but I've tried to do, I am progressively less prescriptive with my kids. I want my kids to be happy in their life. The outcome I want is for them to be happy. I don't care what career they choose. I don't care what they do. So if I really want them to be happy in whatever they choose, and I want them to own it, right? It's your decision. I try not to apply much influence other than I'm a big believer in education. It's what CampusLogic enables is education.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's so much data that shows that a 4-year degree, even and graduate work is even more so, is a game changer with respect to wealth creation and happiness in employment. So I want my kids to go to school, but other than that,
So what do you mean? You said as you're getting older, you're sort of like less prescriptive. I feel like there's something.
I just worry less about what they choose in their career, as long as they.
Oh, okay.
I try to give less advice and ask more questions about, hey, what are you interested in?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Hamid is he lives here in Arizona. He was chief evangelist for Google Education for a number of years, and one of the things he said that really has stuck with me is, he said, we should be asking our kids not what you want to be, but what problem do you want to solve? And that's been, I'm really interested in having those conversations with young people.
I love that.
What problem do you want to solve? And because it gets, we should see the world in terms of like solutions, problems and solutions, right? What can and where can I lean in to fix something? And so that I thought that was really good advice that he gave. I've heard him say multiple times.
That's awesome. Speaking of education, there's a lot of discussion about student loan forgiveness. I'm kind of curious where you are on that topic, and how would that impact CampusLogic?
So student loan forgiveness, student loan forgiveness is after students finish school, they've either dropped out and loans have gone into repayment, or they've graduated and loans have gone into repayment. We don't have any products or services for the way loans are serviced or anything like that. We don't make more or less money if loan volume goes up or down. We sell a subscription to colleges, universities to make their process easier. It's fixed price subscription. It doesn't scale up by volume. So it's not like we have a dog in the fight here. But
if education became more sort of like free, would that affect CampusLogic?
Probably in positive ways. And
Okay.
so two things. I do have an opinion about student loan forgiveness, even though it doesn't affect us. And then two, I do have an opinion about free education as well. So which one do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about both. Let's start with student loans, and then we'll go.
Well,
into the other.
I think one of the reasons I think that student loan forgiveness is dissatisfying to a lot of us as Americans. I mean, I had student loans,
Right.
and paid them back. A lot of people think, well, I had to pay my loans back. You should have to pay yours back. But we live in an era of mass stimulus, right? So it is a truth that student loan forgiveness will
stimulate the economy.
Will stimulate the economy.
Yeah.
There's 45 million borrowers or something like that.
There's no question about it. We
Yeah.
just saw an example of stimulating the economy with the $2 trillion COVID package, right, last year.
Yeah. Now the question is how much to do and who to do it for. I think what President Biden has talked about is something not in the $50,000 range, but in $10,000 range. I can't remember the exact numbers, but there is something like, I don't know, 15 million Americans. If you were in the 10 to 15,000 per person range of forgiveness, that would basically be debt free, and this is something that's like that would stimulate the economy.
Right.
It's not that cash goes in their pocket. So keep in mind, the lender is the federal government. So when people talk about this is already on the federal balance sheet. For the last year, there's been student loan. Now here's the counter argument. We've already gotten a lot of the stimulus because as part of previous stimulus package, I believe student loan rates went to 0% it's basically a moratorium on student loan payments. So to some extent, people are already not paying their student loan payments because you don't have to, right?
Right.
And it's not accruing interest because they lower the interest, right?
Is it true for all student loans? Like, places like private colleges like Apollo Group or whatever that are like selling students to come into their schools?
Well, there's two parts of there's two in the higher education industry. There's two lending vehicles. There's direct lending, where you're basically borrowing directly from the federal government.
Okay.
And I think that represents, I should know this number, but it's $120 to $130 billion a year.
Okay.
And the private lending side, and it used to be different. This was the regulatory change I was referring to earlier. But I think the private lending side is like 10 to 20 billion, like through Wells Fargo or Citibank or something like that. That's really just credit-based lending.
Right.
So the bulk of this is federal loans. Now, yes, all schools that are eligible can award what's called Title IV loans, these direct loans from the federal government. But I do think it would stimulate the economy. I don't think. I think targeted. If it's targeted stimulus, should we be giving the medical student, who is an orthopedic surgeon who has $300,000 worth of debt, should we be like wiping their debt out? I don't think so. But if should we be, doing something that's more targeted? I don't.
The philosophy student who can't.
Yeah. What gets lost in the conversation, really, what really gets lost in the conversation is we have a problem in this country of debt without degree.
Right.
So that's the problem with the student debt number. People that finish college have really high repayment rates of their loans. Where there are defaults and struggling, it's people that went to some school, had debt,
but didn't finish. Right.
They got effectively no return, like zero return on their investment, and so that's a problem, I think, for that. So I think you could be targeted in a couple ways there.
Okay, it sounds like you're somewhat for student loan forgiveness of some amount. Did I hear that correctly?
I guess I don't see a downside if you're going to stroke a bunch of checks to Americans anyway, in a somewhat targeted or untargeted way. It's no different, and this is already on the federal balance sheet. And for things that are not being paid, let's say things that are already in default, you don't lose anything by getting rid of that. In fact, so I am for targeted and small dollar targeted. I don't see a reason not to do it, personally.
Okay, I won't challenge that just yet. I want to talk about, you said also about education. Like, what are your thoughts about that? Like, with respect to...
Well, if you look at higher education, it's similar to healthcare in that, the payment dynamics. Actually, healthcare is a pretty good corollary where there's, a patient, a provider, and a payer. Right. And there's a similar corollary in higher education to that, although on the payer side, it's mostly debt that you have to repay back. If you look, when people say, what do you think about free college? If you want free college and you're a low-income student, it's free today. I mean, via Pell Grant program. If people chose to go to community colleges are the best deal in town. What I think gets lost in that part of the conversation is, should we enable any consumer, any student who wants to go to the most expensive possible school they can, should they be able to go to that school for free? Or I think there are a lot of free pathways. Now the way you make your question earlier is how would this affect CampusLogic if college were free? So the Pell Grant program, these are grants. And I think it's about $35 or $40 billion a year that it flows through, and that's primarily for low-income students. The way you affect free college is to increase the threshold, increase the dollars to the Pell Grant program. That's already in place. The Pell Grant program already exists. All Congress would need to do is to, modify the parameters
for qualification.
For qualification, and including, and there's
and that's a worthwhile investment as far as
Now I think what this is not. There's a lot of people, including at CampusLogic, that disagree with me. Let me just give my caveat. I'm expressing my own opinions.
I mean, like, we're not having a detailed debate about this stuff, but
what I think happens whenever there's a subsidy in any asset. I mean, you think about all the asset classes that you invest in. Even take a look at whenever you see, why are home prices going up so much right now?
Right.
And part of it is mortgages are really cheap,
Right.
right? And so when you have cheap money, the underlying asset always inflates. Higher education is no different. And so when you have cheap or free money, it inflates. I think if you are going to provide a subsidy in the form of grant money to students, capping the amount of borrowing seems like a logical, response to me.
Right.
So what we don't want to have is more money flowing through the system without curbing borrowing.
Right.
And so I think that there does need to be more discipline. Similar to healthcare, if you look at healthcare costs, most of the spend in healthcare, the cost in healthcare has not been going to doctors, right? We have more administrative spend in healthcare than we do actually provider spend in healthcare, and that's been a trend that's been going on for a long time. Higher education is the same way. We have about the same number of teachers we've had in higher education for a really long time, and so for decades. And so what you have seen is more administrative spend, and for a number of reasons. Schools trying to be more competitive to, build a new gym, to be more competitive to attract more students, and so I think that is, I think you've got to, manage the spend, and I think there's some hybrid models, and COVID probably is driving digital transformation for higher education in ways that are going to have some real long-term benefits, where people are going to realize, you know what, if I got 1,000 student section of American history for incoming freshmen, does that really need to be delivered in person?
Right.
Like, there's no utility.
It's essentially remote anyway because you're so far
exactly.
up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I think you'll see some hybrid models where people get the benefit of community,
Right.
Physical community, with some remote learning that and if you ask college students today, I think most college students want that.
Yeah.
Some mix. They want the social, they want some certain content in person, and they are happy to have some of it be remote and flexible.
COVID has hit the reset button on so many different things, and education is probably one of the biggest things impacted because, if you're paying, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 per year for your education, and then you're still attending classes through Zoom.
Yeah.
You're sort of wondering,
Doesn't feel good.
Yeah, why am I going to this school versus like literally watching those lectures for free from MIT or Harvard or wherever. Super fascinating.
Yeah, I will say also for our business, it's been I'll say a relative tailwind. Like we usually, think about, we went remote. It could have been literally 365 days ago today. It was like this week, right?
Yeah.
We went remote. So did colleges, universities. We usually close a lot of new business in March, the end of Q1, and March was slow for us, but Q2 was great. Q3 good, Q4 great for us. 2 of our best 3 quarters ever for new sales happened last year, because you can't tell students, hey, why don't you drop these documents off at the financial aid office?
Right.
Why don't you come see me and let's talk about your aid package? Why don't you drop this scholarship application off here?
They actually needed your software to execute.
Yeah. So digital transformation was already occurring in so many industries, ours being the same, and I do think it's an accelerator for software companies of all sorts. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited about software investing. I just think we've got decades ahead of us of transformation happening.
So awesome. So great to talk to you about all this stuff. And that we're coming up. We've been talking for over an hour and 15 minutes or so. I feel like we got to wrap it up at some point, but
why don't you edit all the stupid things I said and be shorter?
No, if I edited all the stupid things I said. No, actually, I think there's so much good stuff in there and good material for founders, for investors, for the Arizona tech community. It's awesome. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Nothing in particular. Anything? We didn't talk about crypto, or we didn't talk about any of your.
Do you want to? Yeah, no, let's do it.
No, I don't want to. But we didn't. I didn't.
I didn't think you wanted to.
I'm not a crypto investor, but I no. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I know we've talked a little bit about the markets. Today was a really big down day for the markets, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about where things are going. Are you in the public markets? Are you keeping your money there?
You know, I would say I am a private market investor.
Okay.
And so that includes in private. So I have, a really small, percentage of my net worth in the public markets. And in the public markets that I am in, it is in like preferred equities, which really are fixed income instruments, really. And here's why. Part of it is it's not an indictment on the market as much as it is an indictment on my psychology. So I don't sleep very well when I'm like worried about, like I did check the market once today because I opened my CNBC app to see what's going on, but I like don't care, right? So I couldn't tell you what the S&P 500 or Dow was down today. I just couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
And I sleep a lot better when that happens. So that's more a reflection on me. Having said that, we have this whole generation of individuals that don't seem to know that there's always reversion to the mean. So anybody listening to this should go Google Shiller PE ratio. Like, at least yesterday, it was 35. It's the only time it's ever, like the trailing 12 or the forward PE ratio of the S&P 500 has been higher. It was 1999. The only time in history. So there will be reversion, and I think the mean is like in the high teens, like 16, 17 PE ratio. So if you believe there's going to be reversion to the mean, I don't know why you would not believe that. Go look at the graph. Like there's always reversion to the mean.
Right.
If you don't think there's going to be reversion to the mean, you must know something that like the rest of the world doesn't know. Like we are not going to persist at 30, 35. I mean, in 1999 it got up to like 44 was the PE ratio. We're not going to, like, we may get there. I actually think there's so much liquidity, markets could run a lot longer.
Right.
But I don't think that
it's sustainable long term.
If you think that there's going to be reversion to the mean on the PE ratio, and I don't know why anybody would not believe that,
right,
there will be some pullback. Now, how and when, nobody knows that, and I don't have the psychology for it.
Right.
But I do think it's helpful. We want to help some of our young people understand that there is a difference between gambling and trading, and there's a difference between trading and investing.
Right.
And most people should be investing for the long term and have the long term mindset, and don't worry about market fluctuations.
That's a great piece of advice. Yeah. And because I think people get super hung up on the historical performance of a market and just assume based on the past X number of months or years of performance in any given market, whether it's the housing market in early 2000s, all the way till 2008 when it finally sort of collapsed, or the stock market or any particular stock. They look at the history of it and they say, oh, that's the one I want because it's been going up, right? And that's not necessarily a good strategy, because if it's been going up for a long time, chances are, or there's a good possibility it can also be overvalued. Right.
I tell my kids that are in their 20s, and they'll ask me about investment advice, and I'll say, "What do you want to own?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, I'm 52 and you're 22, so like my point of view is going to be different than yours.
Right.
But you should not worry about it. You should be putting money every paycheck. You should be putting money away, and you should be investing. Don't worry so much about it. You don't need this money for like 40 years.
Right.
And so I do think people need to have a long view of that. I'm going to ask you about crypto.
Yeah, go for it.
Is it a store of value or is it a currency? I'm interested in your opinion on this.
It's definitely not a currency in my opinion, right? I mean, I've had heated arguments with people about this, but I don't view it as currency because you can't price anything in crypto, right? Like you can't say this computer costs X Bitcoin, because X is a variable to what Bitcoin costs in dollars at any given moment. So you literally have to reprice this product every few minutes if you want to make sure that you don't get gypped. So if you can't price it in Bitcoin or crypto, then it's not a currency, right? Whereas you can price it in dollars, you can price it in euros or whatever. And even in other currencies, it can fluctuate from month to month,
Right.
but not minute to minute. So from that perspective, I think crypto shouldn't be viewed as a currency, or it's not super useful as a currency. But one way that I started looking at it last year, which I think is super useful, is as a alternative to gold. Now, the reason, again, all my opinions, but the reason that gold seems to have value is that people have been agreeing that it has value for thousands of years, right? It's been used as some sort of storage of value.
Store of value.
Store of value for over 2,000 years. I think it was 2,500 years ago when it first sort of came on the scene. So it has had the test of time on its side, but it's very impractical, right? If you have gold, you actually have a physical product. You can't easily send it to someone. There's a lot of issues with it, and Bitcoin sort of solves a lot of those type of problems. Whereas, if you own, let's say, just for sake of argument, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, it has zero weight, right? Like if you owned $1 billion worth of gold, you'd have to have this massive vault and like storage facility for it. And you could potentially send any amount of Bitcoin anywhere in the world in less than a half an hour. So it has all these benefits that make it super valuable, and it has worldwide acceptance that it does have value from a storage of value. And the value is quite, fluctuating. But the reason I think I'm optimistic about its future, and I don't necessarily care about its current price versus a month from now or a year from now, but optimistic about its future long term, is because in lots of different countries where like their own currency is not necessarily a stable currency.
Yeah.
And there's huge amounts of inflation. Like the country I'm from, every year there's 25-30% of inflation, and you can't keep your money in cash. There is no alternative, and people have been buying rugs and gold essentially, and historically, this provides them another alternative as a way to put it into Bitcoin, and that can happen in lots of different countries where that stability is not there. And in the U.S., a lot of people's mindset is that stability might not necessarily be there even for the U.S. currency for long term because of all of this free printing money business. So, when you look at it, when you sort of zoom out and look at it from like, okay, worldwide, does Bitcoin have value and utility for storage of some kind of value? I think it does for sure. Now, what is that value, and is it going to go up because of its hardcore limited supply? It does seem like, the more people that accept it, the higher the value is going to go over time. So, that's why I kind of like it.
I like it.
Now I haven't invested a huge portion of, I haven't invested heavily into Bitcoin, but I look at it as, if I was going to buy some gold instead, I would buy Bitcoin.
I like it. Yeah, I do wonder people that are. I have asked people that have owned Bitcoin. I don't. I've asked people, did you buy this instead of gold? And that makes perfect sense to me. If you're buying this instead of some other store of value, if you feel like gold has a place in your portfolio, that makes a ton of sense to me.
Right.
But it's when people treat it as something else, I'm sure I'm just an old guy who doesn't understand anything here.
No, it's I think it has some utility. The utility of being able to send it to anywhere in the world is also kind of interesting. But
well, thanks for having me on the podcast today.
It was awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for the amazing chat. I mean, it was like super valuable for me personally, and I hope for a lot of the listeners, a lot of the founders, and hopefully will encourage more investors as well to come along, right, for this ride.
Yeah. I when I say that long term, I hope to be the most active software investor in Arizona, I would gladly not be first. I would.
Well, I'm going to try to beat you on that.
I would love that. As you know, I'd love to co-invest with you in everything, in every B2B SaaS company you want to do. I'm all in on that. But we need more capital and active support from an operational mindset, which you clearly have, and several others do as well. I know. There's several other founders making active investments, but I'm excited about what's going on here. There's great companies being built here and it's a great place to, candidly build a company. Phoenix is a wonderful place.
I love Arizona, and I couldn't agree more. We'll end it there. Thank you so much,
thank
Greg.
you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.